What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 291. My name is Marshall, one of your Limited Resources. Joining me on the line, all the way from Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. LSV, what's going on, buddy?
I'm good, though. It's kind of weird having a sunset show when we're recording it like way late at night. The sun's already set. Like it feels like we're not doing full justice to the theme of the show.
You wouldn't believe it, but here 9:39 p.m. and the sun has not fully set yet.
Oh, well,
I can still see the sky. So we're actually deep into sunset mode here, though. If we're going to do it before it's over, we're going to have to be pretty fast. We've probably got about 10 minutes. But Sunset Show. We're doing the Dragons of Tarkir Sunset Show. These are, of course, the shows where we get to look back on a format before we say goodbye to it. And we'll be taking a look at, some of the card evaluations we had, some of the stories, and a bunch of different categories that we've come up with for the Sunset Show for Dragons. Before we do, though, I want to mention our sponsor, ChannelFireball.com. They are the place to go if you want to pick up singles for maybe a standard deck or your commander deck, maybe fill out that modern sideboard, something like that. Or, of course, sealed product. If you want to draft with your friends, you can even sell your rares right back to Channel Fireball. You'll get a 30% bonus if you want to trade it in for store credit, which means, of course, that you can get more booster packs and do more drafts. See how this works? It's called the Circle of Life, and you can find it at Channel Fireball, along with articles, podcasts, videos from some of the best players in the world, and a lot of great information there. There's been a lot of good talk on Twitter lately about the series that you're doing, actually, Luis, separate, the You Make the Play. What is it called? What's the play?
Yeah, what's the play?
Yeah, which has been definitely fun. I think people really enjoy that. And then also people like PV's articles, the ones on CFB about the mulligan decisions.
Yeah, Keeper Mull is also... We've kind of been moving towards a more interactive sort of article style where we present, this information, this scenario, this opening hand, what have you, and have people take a look at what they think they would do, and then we talk about what we would do and why. I feel like it's actually a very good learning tool, and I mean, as a consumer of PV's articles, for example, I like them. I feel engaged when I read them. It's fun to see what I would do and what PV would do. Generally, I would keep and he would mulligan.
Yeah, Paulo is one of those. He's always amazed me at how good his writing is, considering especially that English is not his first language, and just not only is the content good, but it's also very well written. He really blows me away. He has forever. I think his stuff has just been great. Basically, since I came back to play, his articles have been some of my favorite, and these are a really cool kind of a snapshot type article that he's been doing. You can also support the show directly via the Patreon. You can find it at patreon.com/limitedresources or on lrcast.com. Very easy to sign up, and you can pretty much name your price. You basically pay some amount per episode, and it's for people that want to give back. It's optional. You don't have to do it. The show will be free for as long as I'm running the ship here. But if you have found some value in the show or just want to give back a little to keep the show running, you can do it at Patreon. One of the perks that you get if you do become a patron is you get to submit questions of the week, which I will choose from. And I've got one here from Marcus. And Luis, he says, does one have any hope of becoming a top Magic player playing paper Magic only, or is using MTGO a lot a requirement these days?
I don't think it's a requirement to use Magic Online. If you absolutely cannot stand Magic Online, or you have a Mac, or any number of reasons that you would not want to use Magic Online, then it is certainly not mandatory. I would say most top Magic players play a decent amount online, and that's just because of the convenience. I myself am like, well, it's 10:30 at night. I want to do a draft. You can just do a draft. 2 minutes later, you can be cracking a pack digitally. And the competition on Magic Online is also quite good. When you play in the daily events, when you play in the 8-4 or the 6-3-2-2 queues, is it 6-2-2-2 queues? Mm-hmm. Right. Note my inexperience with those. But when you play those events, you're going to play against people who are quite good. And so I can definitely recommend Magic Online, but let's say you're like Marcus, who, probably has some aspirations of becoming much better at Magic and does not want to play Magic Online. As long as you have a good live place to play, then you can get away with that. You can go to your store a couple times a week or, meet up with friends and draft there. I think most people will have slightly better results if they play against the people online, just because the competition level is very high and very consistent, and you can do it all the time. Like, it's much easier to play. Like, if let's say you have 20 hours let's say you have 12 to 20 hours a week to dedicate to Magic. 12 is actually even a realistic number for someone with a job, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
If you want to use that at a store, if you want to do it live events, you can play like an all-day Saturday event. You play maybe 6 or 7 rounds of Magic plus some other games there, or maybe you go and you play FNM and you play a draft one other day a week. So you're talking like maybe 2 drafts, potentially 3 if you're very efficient. With that much time on Magic Online, you could probably play 6 drafts. You could probably play 10 constructed events, just because you're not paying the transaction costs of moving there and coming back and all that. So, yes, it is possible. It is more difficult, but if you have good people to play with and the dedication to do so, then you certainly can get good results without playing Magic Online. I do know some pros who never play Magic Online, and they do quite well for themselves.
All right. So before we get to the main Sunset Show topic, Luis, it's time to do our Crack-a-Pack and cue the violins. It's our last Dragons of Tarkir Crack-a-Pack. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, Luis. I'm kind of avoiding doing Dragons of Tarkir Crack-a-Packs. I've been doing these Modern Masters 2015 ones. They're more fun. They've got a lot more going on. Because, I'm kind of like, all right, well, are we going to, open a flatten, just move on? When I open up these packs, I don't really get that same excitement because I've drafted this format a fair bit of times, and I'm kind of like over it a little bit, which might foreshadow a little bit some of my thoughts on the format as a whole. But alas, into the foil.
Crack a pack with the normal pack cracking.
This feels nice. Oh, God, that smells really good. All right, I love Dragons of Tarkir. I'm back. All right, and of course, remember that these Crack-a-Packs do go to the Patreon giveaway that we do once a month. I've got a couple of cards. The cards from the pack go to them, of course. So these ones, perhaps not as high expected value as the Modern Masters ones, but so it goes. All right,
I have a question about procedure, though. I got a pack of Modern Masters from Sam at Grand Prix Charlotte. How are we going to integrate that into our Crack-a-Pack? I guess next week we could go back to Modern Masters.
We're not cracking a pack next week.
Why not?
Set review.
Yeah, but set review's not going to take that long.
All right. We'll have a talk after the show. And yes, we're doing the set review.
Of course we are. Why would you?
Now, Shambling Goblin is the first card off.
Shambling Goblin is a solid role player. I think people do not play it as much as they should, but they also shouldn't play it all that often. So I'm certainly not looking to first pick it.
Could not agree more. I have upgraded a little bit from where I had it before, but yeah, you're right. You don't want a ton of them, and you probably only want one anyway. Dragon Fodder, fine. Hasn't really... I found it difficult to abuse in the format, but that said, it's fine.
Yeah, definitely.
Glaring Aegis, I never caught on to this card. I still don't think it's very good. I've had a few people beat me with it. It's the white mana, 1 white mana enchantment aura on a creature, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to tap a creature an opponent controls, and the creature that you're putting it on gets +1/+3, which all told is actually a pretty good rate. 1 mana to pump up your creature pretty big. And then also get something out of the way is worth, it's probably all worth a mana and a card, or at least close enough to it. Just for me though, I've still just not really found that hyper aggressive deck that wants to do things like this. So I don't know if I've ever actually put one of these in my deck. Maybe once.
Yeah. I overrated this card when we first saw it. Cue foreshadowing. And, yeah, I didn't live up to that. Glaring Aegis is just not a card I really want to play.
Yeah. Anticipate.
I do like Anticipate. I don't like first picking Anticipate, but I like having Anticipate in most of my blue decks.
Yeah, it's funny. I was doing a draft at a friend's house on Monday, and one of my buddies, Drew, who doesn't draft, or maybe it was Zame. Anyway, one of them who hasn't drafted the format much said, "How good is Anticipate?" Because I think longtime Magic players will look at a card like Anticipate and think, the card's quite good. Right? Like it's low cost. It's only 2 mana. It's an instant, so you can kind of work it around with your removal suite or maybe a counter spell or whatever. And you get to go through your library pretty aggressively to try to find, the land drop you need, the bomb in your deck, a removal spell, whatever. And the opportunity cost is fairly low. So it's like kind of the stars seem lined up for Anticipate, but for whatever reason, I found that I rarely ended up actually running it, even when I had it in my pile, because I would just put a spell that did something in over it. And not play Anticipate that much. Now, in the times when I came up a little short on playables and I played an Anticipate, I never felt bad about it. I was like, yeah, this card's fine. And I actually like casting it too. It's just that when I felt like I had a good deck, it never had an Anticipate in it, which I don't know. I don't know what that really says about the card. Maybe it's just in that 23rd, 24th card category, just because ultimately it doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't like affect the board or do anything like that. But yeah, for me, it's just one of those fringe playables that would make it in sometimes, and I wasn't really sad about it, but would often not make it in. That's
interesting because I don't recall cutting Anticipates for my deck very often, but I didn't end up with a ton of them. I think people may have been drafting them a little higher than I did. And, okay. When you think a card's a sixth pick and everyone else thinks it's a fourth pick, you just don't see the card very often because other people take it before you do.
Totally.
And yeah, I liked Anticipate. It was never crucial, but it was definitely always a card I was happy to have.
Okay. Next is Sandstep Scavenger. That's the 4 and a green 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you bolster 2. As usual, the green 5-drop slot, and the 5-drop slot in general is quite heated in the competition category, and Sandstep Scavenger, unfortunately, ended up being one of the bottom competitors in that tier. There was just too many other cards that I'd rather play over it, so I rarely did, even though I actually don't think this card's that bad. I think it's an okay Magic card. I just never ended up playing it myself because I always found better stuff to do at 5.
This is a powerful format. It was powerful enough, at least, that a 5-mana 4/4, maybe with 2 of the stats having haste a little bit, still just not good enough.
It just wasn't good enough. Yeah.
A card, if you put it in your deck, you should be unhappy.
Exactly. Reckless Imp, another card I didn't play a whole lot of, but I think did see a decent amount of play in the format. It's a 2/2 flyer for 3 that can't block, and it's got dash for 1 and a black. I don't know. I guess part of me always felt like when I was playing a black deck that it often wasn't super aggressive, and if it was, then it was paired with red, and then Reckless Imp like could make the cut. But I think it might have fallen into a similar category to what you just described, Luis, where it was like maybe other people were taking it higher, because I found myself rarely running a Reckless Imp.
If you switch the dash costs and the casting cost, you'd have a card. But
oh yeah, for sure.
But unfortunately for Reckless Imp, it's just, yeah, again, a slightly below curve. It's just one of the like vast legion of cards that at a mana cheaper would be great, and at its current mana cost is just not good enough.
Yeah. And that's funny, and you mentioned this before, and I think this comes up again, which is just that the power level was pretty high in this set, but I also think it was pretty average for what we see out of limited sets these days. And that, just leads me to believe that, the bar's pretty high now. This is a reasonably playable card, and it's just doesn't really make the cut that often. So, maybe best artwork of the set here, Ancient Carp. Very cool artwork. Unfortunately, not a great Magic card. Again, going back to what I said about 5-drops, a 2/5 with no, rules text for 5 mana is not really gonna pull its own. I mean, there have been formats where I would play a card like this, but this one didn't end up being one of them.
Yeah, the card is, as you said, a piece of carp.
Enduring Victory is next. It's the 4 and a white instant destroy target attacking or blocking creature and bolster 1. Found this card quite playable. This isn't in the tier 1 removal, but it's in the tier 1.5 to tier 2 removal category where, if I was playing white, I would always play my first Enduring Victory, and there was multiple decks where I'd even play 2 of them if I was trying to slow things down significantly. And not an exciting pick. Like you don't see this like a flatten and go, "Ooh, sweet, I got a flatten. I got an ultimate price," something like that. But like I said, the first one always made the cut for me, and sometimes even the second.
Yeah, I again wouldn't be super happy if I had to take this just because every time you don't take a rare in Dragons, it's not as bad as Favorite Forge, but every time you don't take a rare in Dragons, you actually do feel like you're starting a little behind the ball.
Yeah, that is true. Next is Segmented Crotic, which is the big megamorph. Woolly Loxodon, you are not Segmented Crotic. I'm sorry.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
It's also funny, we were talking about 1 mana, and it feels like a lot of the megamorphs were also a mana more expensive than you would want them to be great.
Yeah, that's a good point. Poor Segmented Crotic. All right, our last common.
He's not the worst Crotic in the set. Just
that is true. That's the ambush.
I guess that one maybe was Fate Reforged.
I think it was Fate Reforged, but yeah. Tail Slash. So we've got our best common for last year, it looks like. We have really not seen anything worthy of a first pick up until Tail Slash. And I think Tail Slash is first pickable, though. I kind of go back to what you said for our last pick, which is that, being a non-rare, I actually wouldn't be that happy to take Tail Slash first, though. I do think it's head and shoulders above what we've opened so far.
Agreed. One of the things I did like about this set was that what the best red common was just not clear, and you had a lot of different people disagreeing at all points in the format. So that was pretty cool. Tail Slash was always in the conversation. And yeah, if you have to take a Tail Slash, you have to take a Tail Slash. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and we'll actually talk about that in a little bit, too. We're going to go over what we thought was the best common from each color a little later. Enduring Scale Lord is our first uncommon. This is the 6-mana 4/4 flyer. And whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are placed on any other creature you control, you get that many +1/+1 counters on this guy.
I never got to go infinite, which is what I was hoping to do with this card.
Now you need two of them to do that? Is that
two
right?
of them and give something a counter. Scale Lord gets a counter. Other Scale Lord sees that, and they just go back and forth.
Ugh, how did that never happen? I want that to happen. That never happened to me either. This is actually a card that I've heard varying reviews on from different pros. I know some of them really dislike this card. I think it was Cuneo who said he thought it was just unplayable. I think it was him. Hopefully I'm not crediting that to the wrong person.
Cuneo does only have a couple modes with cards, and he has a lot of cards in the category of worse than a basic land. Every time he sees someone play one of these cards, he's like, you can add as many basic lands as you want.
Yeah. And that's just in line with his humor, he's really funny. I found Enduring Scale Lord not good. I rarely picked it high, but if I was in these two colors, I would often put one in my deck. I find that, green and white were pretty easy to get counters going. This card's just not efficient. That was the downside to it. It costs all the way up to 6 mana. You get a 4/4 flyer, which isn't a crushing disappointment, but it often didn't keep up with what other people were doing with their 6 mana. So you kind of did need to put a counter on something to make it work, and that proved pretty difficult. But if you needed that top end flyer, I would put it in during Scale Lord in my green white deck. Just not like I would rather just take a Tail Slash though, for example.
There are worse things to put in your deck than a 6-mana 4/4 flyer, even with the other ability doesn't trigger.
Yeah. Orator of Ojutai.
Another card which I feel was not quite there. This is a 1 and a white for a 0/4 that Flying Defender draws you a card if you have a dragon. It's one of the dragon cycle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's the kind of card I like in my decks in general. It's a good controlling card, but this is one of my big complaints about this set. There just weren't enough dragons in the set, and as such, Orator of Ojutai just really didn't get there.
No, it didn't, which is really sad. I mean, maybe they had this in mind for Constructed or something, but this is the type of card I'd love to play in Limited if I could trigger it some reasonable amount of time, but yeah, that just didn't happen often enough. Last uncommon is Dragonloft Idol, which is the 4 mana 3/3, and if you control a dragon, it gets +1/+1 and has Flample. I think I gave this a really low grade. I don't really know why I gave it such a low grade. Maybe I was just mad at it or something, but this card it never proved to be very good. Probably for similar reasons to what you just said with Orator. There's just not enough dragons. But I mean, it's still a 3/3 for 4. Like if you ran one of these, you know, it didn't have to be embarrassed, but I never did. I don't think this card was particularly good.
Yeah, it was better than we said it was during the set review insofar as it was playable and sometimes it was decent even. But yeah, it was nothing you'd be too excited about. I'm still on Tail Slash at this point.
I am too, and this is actually a really sick one. So our listeners will be happy to know that we've got Narset Transcendent here for our Mythic Rare, as it turned out. But this is actually really cool Crack-a-Pack because this raises some interesting questions. So Narset, of course, is 2 white blue for a 6 loyalty planeswalker. You can +1 or look at the top card of your library. If it's a non-creature, non-land card, you can reveal it and put it in your hand. You can -2 to give your next instant or sorcery rebound. And her ultimate is -9. You get an emblem with your opponents cannot cast non-creature spells. So, you know, traditionally, with few exceptions, planeswalkers in Limited were just great. It almost didn't matter exactly what they did as long as they generated some value for you. They tended to warp the board state and make things pretty tough. I have played with and against Narset in Limited and found her very unimpressive. Not awful by any stretch, but pretty minimal as far as board impact went. Now, maybe I just didn't line up my rebound spells the right way, and I could have taken over or drafted around Narset better or something. But I actually, am not a huge fan. Like, if I'm, drafted in a situation where I don't really care about the rare, Narset is not one of those cards that makes me want to be like, oh, I'm going to commit to blue-white early so that I can play my Narset and then win the game. It's like, well, this is a powerful card, but it's pretty committal on blue-white, which is not a particularly powerful color pair here either. I think you could make an argument for taking Tail Slash instead of Narset here.
Well, the thing about Narset you have to realize is that you get to add as many basic lands as you want to it.
Oh!
So I tried to make Narset work, but just basically hasn't, just too slow off it. If you play it on a stable board, then maybe it draws you a card or two. And if you play it on a stable board, then get to untap and play a spell and rebound it. I mean, that is cool, but you paid a lot of mana for that and took on a lot of risk. Like, what if they just flatten one of your creatures and then get to attack and kill Narset? Also, Narset's a 2-color card. So, yeah, I would be taking Tail Slash here. I don't think it's super close.
Yeah, I would be taking Tail Slash as well. And I think that is interesting. Just the thing that jumps out to me the most about this is the fact that Narset's 2 colors and not 2 colors that I'm super excited to get into. I don't think that blue-white is unplayable in the format, but it's not one of the premium color pairs at all. It doesn't even really work that well together. So, yeah, I'd actually take the Tail Slash. But good news for potential for a listener, though, because we'll be giving away that Narset in a couple of weeks. Okay, so that's going to do it for our last Dragons of Tarkir Crack-a-Pack. Let's dive into the Sunset show now. So if this is your first rodeo on the Sunset shows, what these are a time for us to look back at, in this case, Dragons of Tarkir, and we're going to be going over a bunch of categories that, well, we just made up, to be honest, but, to talk about the format, and we'll be looking at it from a big picture perspective, and we'll zoom in and look at individual cards and such as well, and just kind of say goodbye to Dragons and reflect on it. How good was it? What did we like about it? What did we not like about it? And have a fun time, maybe telling some stories here too. So I'm going to start off very broad. And I'm gonna throw this one at you, Luis, here, and I'll answer it as well. If you could summarize the set in one sentence, what would that sentence be?
The sentence would have some commas in it, but it's still just going to be one grammatical sentence.
one compound run-on sentence. Okay, do it.
Dragons of Tarkir drafts ended up 2 colors with medium aggro and lots of value. So to expand on that, you were 2 colors the vast majority of the time. You almost never splashed and basically never played solid 3. Like, sometimes you would have 2 dual lands and a splash card, but very, very rarely. So 2 colors, that's, I think, the main takeaway. Second part is medium aggro, where, yes, there were aggro decks and you could get behind and lose to that, but a lot of games just didn't go that direction. They were just kind of like, yeah, you needed to play something by turn 3 or 4, but if you missed on a 2-drop on the draw, you weren't just dead, whereas some formats, that is the case. And then lots of value. Just a lot of the decks that did well are just good at accumulating value. Not that the format's super, super grindy, but the playing cards that interacted well against your opponent's cards was just good. You didn't need to build a super synergy deck. You were mostly just looking at picking up incremental card advantage.
My sentence to summarize this set was played a lot like a core set. And
when you say core set, you mean like a core Magic set, not like a core set.
That's right, Luis. Thank you for that. Yes. And, core set drafting usually is 2-color. It usually doesn't promote 3-color decks, light splashes here and there, which we definitely saw in Dragons as well. And generally speaking, when core set draft traditionally has been the colors are broken off into color pairs, and then each of those kind of has its own identity or feel to it. And that's what it felt like to me for Dragons. Coming off of Khans of Tarkir, it was a bit of a shell shock. Khans was quite complicated. You could play, between 2 and 5 colors if you really wanted to. There was a lot of 3-color cards, even at common, that kind of incentivize you to be 3 colors at the minimum. And so that was way different than what we saw here, which this played out a lot more straightforwardly for me. There wasn't a lot of build around me stuff going on. There was a few cards that existed, but they just weren't really, Skywise teachings never really paid you off enough, I didn't think. And so, at the end of the day, it was like, well, I'm playing creatures, I'm playing removal spells, I've got combat tricks, maybe I've got a bomb. Let's play Magic, and that was it. And I thought that was fine. I didn't find the set particularly compelling for that reason, because I do kind of expect a little more depth, perhaps, out of my, not core sets. And because the thing is, I'm a big fan of drafting core sets, and when we come up to Origins, I'm quite excited for that. M13 is in my top 5 all timers, and so I do enjoy a simplified draft experience because it's still Magic, it's still deep, it still has a lot going on. But I don't know that I really wanted to get it here. That's kind of the like, as we look back on it, I think about it like that was a solid set. Like you don't see anybody writing about this set about, oh, look at the mistakes Wizards made, or wow, this format was so imbalanced so we had to draft it for so long. Like, to me, they didn't aim super high with the limited format for this set, but they hit the goal. Like, it was totally draftable. I drafted it a bunch of times. It was still fun. It just didn't really stick out to me as anything other than just sort of Magic, like two color pairs, draft Magic, that kind of thing. Speaking of those, what turned out to be the best archetypes? I've put down a few here that I really liked. Blue-Black Exploit was one that I put down. That was my favorite.
How did that one go? I don't think I ever got a chance to draft.
Yeah. As people queue up your GP footage or whatever and see you just constantly drafting it. But yeah, that was of course the Exploit deck, right? And it was the value deck of the format as well. It had a lot of ways for you to draw extra cards and try to kind of draw the game out to the point that you could overwhelm your opponent with card advantage or some type of big bomb or whatever. And you and I both like playing those type of decks, and this was the one. And I also thought it just happened to be the best, or one of the best 2-color archetypes. It certainly was the one that had the target on its back. Remember back at the beginning, like coming out of the pre-release, everybody was like, "Ooh, blue-black, sweet." And I was like, "No," because I also played blue-black at the pre-release and realized how sweet it was pretty soon, and I was a little bummed. Other ones that jumped out were red-black beatdown. Sometimes dash, though
you'd end up with dash cards in your deck, but rarely will you like, yeah, this is a dash deck.
Exactly. That happened almost never. I remember early in the format, one of my big question marks was, hey, are we going to be doing dash decks? Like, are we going to be like really picking these Warbringers and Ambuscade Shamans and trying to be, most of our creatures are dash and we're kind of doing the combo finish? Or is it going to be just like an aggressive deck that's supplemented by dash? And it ended up being the second one. Not that I did see, a few dedicated dash decks do their thing. But it was very rare. It happened almost never. And almost all the decks that I saw that were really good weren't that way. I'm not even convinced that those dash decks were better than the normal version of red-black. But I felt like red and black were two of the deepest colors, and they complemented each other enough so that you had, overall a very high card quality, and it made for one of the better archetypes. The other one I put down was green-red beats, which I don't think is quite as good as these first two, but it's one that I had a lot of success with, and I just think it was very strong. Didn't have any major weaknesses. You could kill most of the things that you needed to kill. It had a strong early, mid, and late game, and it could just sort of get the job done. The green was weak. You did need to do a lot of work by the time you got to the Fate Reforged pack. The green only offered you a couple of really decent cards that you wanted. But if you were base red and then you picked up some of the good green cards from Dragons and a few of the key ones left over from Fate Reforged, I thought the deck was quite good. Also, we can deduce here that I think red was probably the deepest color, since I do have it in two different decks here.
Yeah, not only was red the deepest color, white doesn't appear in our top 3 decks here, and I actually agree with that. I'm not fighting for that to change. Another thing I found was interesting was green wasn't great, but it was really good when paired with red. So that was kind of cool.
That was pretty cool. Yeah. I thought the people came into the format thinking green was okay, and then immediately were down on it. I mean, by the time the Pro Tour rolled around, which is, only a few weeks after the set comes out, people were like, green is garbage. You don't want it, because they put together the fact that the cards in Dragons, they're not overwhelmingly good. They were kind of solid to good. And then you just get bricked in the last pack where you're picking up like, Whisper of the Wilds and the fight card, Hunt the Week or whatever, were kind of the only cards that really stood out as decent cards in that last pack. But as it turns out, draft is self-correcting in many ways. And if people just abandon green, I felt like if I cut the good green cards from Dragons, picked up a couple of good green cards, and then filled in the rest with another color, I was actually okay with that. I never really shied away from playing green, even though I did agree that it wouldn't support, maybe 2 drafters or 3 or something like that at the table, but I thought I could do 1 no problem, and 2 was probably okay as long as you weren't trying to be base green.
One of the kind of overused tropes when it comes to Magic and drafting in new sets is, first people say that, this format's much slower, than most, and card advantage is really important. Then they say, no, tempo is really important, and they say that green sucks. And these are just well-known.
God, that is so true.
Well-known like cycles that
weird. I never thought about that until you said it, but it's totally true. Everybody always says that.
Yeah, and it's rarely as true as people think. Yeah, I don't think green was great here, but I don't think it sucked. I think you could play green, and taking a green card was a fine thing to do.
That's really interesting. I wonder why that happens. It's just the same.
Well, people like
just a hive mind thing.
Yeah, people like coming to conclusions and making definitive statements, even though they're just wrong.
Yeah, I know that's funny. I find that's. I don't know if it's a strength or weakness of mine, but I'm very wary of coming down and making blanket statements like that until I really know. Though I've always thought about that, like in terms of like a testing team or whatever, you do kind of need somebody who's willing to just draw the line somewhere and say, this is what you need to do. I mean, if they're wrong, it's terrible, but if they're closer to being right than wrong, and maybe if they're being a little extreme about their opinion, it might be better. But I've always thought about that, because there's definitely different types of people in the Magic community that will come down. We kind of speak out against that on the show, but the hyperbolic, this is true and everything else isn't. And, that thing doesn't really get people the knowledge that they need. But if you're testing for the Pro Tour and you've got 2 weeks, you do need somebody who can make sort of broad level statements about a set and be close to right about it. So interesting dynamic there that we'll probably see forever in Magic. What about the worst archetypes?
There are some obviously bad ones, certainly. Like you have listed 4 to 5 color good stuff, and yeah, that sounds appealing, but you kind of knew going in, right, that it wasn't like, this is going to be a great deck. You're just like trying to see what would happen.
Yeah, I wanted to test it out coming off of cons,
right,
and realized very quickly that no, this is not the place for that.
The one that I found the most disappointing, because it seemed so plausible, was the blue-white tempo deck. It seemed like the cards were there for that. You had, Artful Dodge, or Artful Maneuver, rather. You had Centaur Soul. You had these, like, good rebound combat tricks. You had some prowess cards from Fate Reforged, and you had some semi-prowess cards from Dragons, like the Cunning Breeze Dancer and Strong Arm Monk. And it felt like, there's something here. And then there just wasn't. Every time I drafted blue-white, the deck just didn't seem good. Like, sometimes you'd have I drafted a blue-white deck that had both Ojutais once. Yeah, that deck was pretty good. But that had nothing to do with the fact that it was a blue-white tempo deck. It was just I had 2 dragons in it. Every time I drafted a normal, a blue-white deck that didn't have, ridiculous rares powering it, it didn't feel like it was really an archetype, whereas blue-black exploit definitely felt like a deck, and that was the one I drafted all the time.
Yeah, that is funny. We did see some dividing lines in some of the colors. I think white was definitely one of them, where some of the cards were quite aggressive and assertive, and others were a lot more defensive-minded. White tended to be more on the aggressive side of things, but blue definitely had cards that looked a little confused, right? It was like, do you want to be beating down in this, or do you want to be sitting back, right? They had cards like Ojutai Interceptor, effectively a 4/2 flyer, that's quite adept at beating down, alongside cards like Ancient Carp, which were a 2/5 on the ground, which maybe if you're going for a flyer strategy or something, you can make that work. But then you had cards like Dirger Nemesis at common, Elusive Spellfist, Lurker, which are kind of like this weird mix of defensive cards and offensive cards. You had your Gurmag Drowners in there as well. It felt a little bit like you weren't really sure where you wanted to go with some of the colors. And the fact that they did split them a little bit meant that there might not have been enough to really support a deck like Blue-White Tempo or whatever. I was surprised that wasn't a thing, though, as well. All right, here's a funny one. What was a funky rare that you always hoped to see? The one that you wanted, when you're opening up your pack and you're just like, come on, one time. And, sure, maybe you're hoping for some sweet Dragon Lord or whatever. That's fine. But what's the weird one that you wanted to see? I know for me, it was Assault Formation. I just felt like that the power is there for that card. I had heard people say, yeah, it's good. Like if you can do it, you can build around it or whatever. And I did play it a couple of times in the format, but I'm sad to say that I just never really had the deck that was, built around it, right? That just did that card justice where I was kind of abusing it or whatever. It was fine. And when I played it, it actually just wasn't that bad on its own anyway, but it never really quite got all the way there for me.
The card I really liked taking and would try to draft around as much as I could is Clone Legion. I just think the card was awesome.
You're such a sicko.
I actually took it in the first streamer draft and got to
cast
I remember.
It
when Trey Van Cleef had out Orc Sure Shot. So
that was insane. I remember that now.
Yeah. Clone Legion was just like a pet card of mine. I don't think it was actually good enough. Like if you had asked me, would you take a Clone Legion when there's high stakes? And my answer would be no. Of course not. It costs 9 mana. But it's a very fun card, and I did like drafting around it. I think a better example of a card which I actually think was legitimately good enough to draft around, but was always very hard and didn't go into every deck was Mirror Mockery. And
yes.
I remember when testing for the Pro Tour, actually, the first time seeing it in play, it got cast on a turn 2 Sidisi's Faithful. Turn 1 Sidisi's Faithful, turn 2 Mirror Mockery, which then basically means, an 0/4 that can attack and bounce an opponent's creature, and that actually locks your opponent out really quickly.
Well, that's great. I never did that.
So basically, Mirror Mockery on an exploit creature is fairly solid, and Mirror Mockery was a playable card that most people thought was just way too cute, even though it did serve a role. It was not in every deck, but every now and then.
Yeah, the only time I really got to use Mirror Mockery to great effect was in a deck with 3 Aven Surveyor in it. And, the fact that the Surveyor has flying and is likely to be able to actually attack is a pretty big deal. And, similar to the 0/4 on turn 1 that you just described, it allows it to, it allows you to attack consistently. And that's the key with Mirror Mockery, is that you want to be doing that. And I was bouncing things and whatever. So I don't know. I didn't really feel good about it still, though. I just felt like, that was kind of cool. I got to go off, but I don't know. I'd rather draft around some, Corpse Swift was one that came to mind for me too, Louisa, as just like a, looks kind of weird card, and you're like, is this too slow? But then you realize it's actually not that mana inefficient in the sense that like you can get 4/4s and 6/6s out of it, and kind of take over the late game, though. Man, that whole tapped thing was so brutal. It felt like it caught up to me all the time. So that was one that I thought about early and then kind of played a few times and maybe wasn't quite as excited about.
I actually think Corpse Swift was a fairly powerful card. It was better than it looked, but it still wasn't, it wasn't like a high tier rare by any stretch. But it was a card that I think you would be happy to play most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you were controlling. All right. Which cards were we most wrong about during the set reviews? The ones that really just surprised us one way or the other. I picked a couple out. I looked over the commons and uncommons set review grades, and I actually thought we did pretty well with it. To be honest, I went through and I thought, well, there's a few I'd bump around here or there, but nothing major. For me, at least, that I was like, wow, we just totally whiffed on that card. But of course, we were definitely not perfect. One of them that jumped out was Zephyr Scribe, which we actually both gave it a B. But I would give it in the C to C minus camp now. The card just didn't hold up. It wasn't that it wasn't playable, but I thought it was going to be good, right? Like a B on our set reviews is like a card that makes you want to go into that color. right? I mean, we're talking about a good removal spell, not like a top tier premium, but like a good removal spell or a really good creature, like an evasive, efficient threat or something. And I thought it was going to be that good. I thought, well, it's a looter. Sometimes you get to loot multiple times, but I guess it was the fact that it costs 3 and then the blue to activate it that held it back. But now I don't even prioritize it. Sometimes one of them sneaks in my list, but oftentimes they don't. And I've definitely left them in the sideboard too, which is not true of any B, generally. If I'm in that color and it's a B, it's in my deck. So I have it downgraded to CC minus at this point.
I think this also goes back to kind of experience with previous sets. Zephyr Scribe is a looter, and looters have traditionally been very, very good. But yeah, Zephyr Scribe was not good. Zephyr Scribe was not a card I took high, and it was a card I often just left in my sideboard, which is surprising given how good looters used to be. Looters were routinely among the best commons. I wonder if that's a function of cards all being closer together now. Like, you're going to end up with, in your 23 cards, almost all of them are at the very least playable, if not good. Whereas maybe in older formats, there's a bigger discrepancy between your bad cards and your good cards. And that makes looters better. But now if all your spells are in a pretty close power level, then you don't really need to loot as often.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, you still get the benefits of getting rid of lands later in the game, but before it was, you were looting for cards like Air Elemental or Terror, where the rest of your cards were much, much worse than that. So that makes perfect sense. Another one that I just kind of liked more than I thought I would was Misthoof Kirin. We both gave it a C+, which I think is a fine starting grade, but I would actually bump it up to a B. This is one of the cards that I took quite early if I was going to be in white, and I really wanted it to be in my deck. I found that card closed out the game very well. It was very mana efficient and good at just laying the beats on. And so that's a card that actually draws me towards white, where before I thought it would just be kind of like a solid role player type card, something like that. But it actually went up for me.
Agreed. It's not a card I was ever really that excited about, but it was certainly not a card you should look to cut.
Yeah. Palace Familiar.
So Palace Familiar was a card that I liked when the first time I saw it. Obviously you can read the card. It says draw a card on it. I love that. But what I didn't realize is that this was just going to be, if not the best blue common, at least in the running for the best blue common, just because of how well it fit into all the different decks you wanted to draft and how well it played in the format. I just think Palace Familiar was better than we initially thought it was.
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, it actually made the list and maybe even high on the list for best blue common for me. And we'll talk about that, like I said, in just a little bit when we go through those. I've kind of picked out the ones I've come down on a card for each of those in some way, and I want to hear what yours ended up being. What were the most underrated cards? The one that jumped out to me was Coat with Venom, which looked like a solid combat trick when we read it, and I think we gave it a pretty reasonable grade as well. I don't think either you or I were down on that card, but I have to say that thing did overtime. That card went way higher on my list than I thought it would. And while it didn't quite reach the heights that like a Ben Stark put it at, which he had it very high.
They literally thought it was better than Flatten.
Yeah, they thought it was better than Flatten at the PT, which I do not agree with. But this card was way better than I gave it credit for originally. And it was a card I wanted, 1 to 3 of in my deck, and I would take it pretty high too. So that was, I think it still remained somewhat underrated even through to the end, in the sense that it was just like, sometimes you just get him 7th and it's like, this card's better than that. I value it higher than that. And so Coat with Venom was kind of the one that jumped out to me.
Coat was, I think, the card that had the biggest delta between how good most people thought it was and how good it actually was. Even though, again, I would not advocate taking it over Flatten. And I think Ben's team actually backed off a little bit on that. But just the fact that a team of people who tested the format a lot thought it was close to Flatten. That's miles different than what most people in the format were at. And yeah, Coat's a great card. I would have nothing but good things to say about it.
All right. I need to know what you have to say about this next one. So this next category is, what was the most controversial card? And only one jumped out to me that was higher than all the rest, and it was Mob Behemoth. This is, of course, the 5/5 for 3 that you have to pay 2 mana to either attack or block with. And I have to say, I still don't know how good this card is. It's been the whole format, and I still have no idea how good this card actually is. And also, I have never heard so many different opinions from people who I trust. I'm like, what do you think about this card? It's terrible. It's garbage. Don't play it. What do you think about this card? I love it. First pick it. It's like, what? I cannot get anybody to give me a consensus on how good or bad Call Cease Mob Behemoth is. It has to be the most controversial.
Yeah, I don't actually even know where I land on this because I've had games where this card's amazing, and I've had plenty of games where the card is just terrible. My guess is that the card is good. And I like how in the Sunset Show I'm guessing, but that's just because it's such a high variance card, which that is, obviously has a downside to it. It's high variance because sometimes it is very bad. But I think that given how big it is and the reward you get for having it in a game where it's good, I do think it is overall a good card, but agree that the fact that I can't even agree with myself on it does probably indicate that it is a controversial card.
Yeah. It's funny. I have tried to play it a couple of times, but I guarantee that most people value this card higher than I did because I didn't see it very often. And maybe it just doesn't fit the style of deck that I build, or maybe my play style, which is I'm trying to build a curve, right? And I like to be really mana efficient throughout the first part of the game if I can, right? That's something I put a big premium on, is using up my mana, for the first few turns. I'm really like trying to build my deck to curve out in many scenarios where I'm playing red. And this card just makes it so weird because I feel like in my ideal scenario, I play this on turn 3 and then don't activate it for 4 turns while I use my mana up on other spells. And this card just, if you do that, it's terrible. Like it's just not going to, give you the return you want. So maybe I'm just, it just doesn't fit into my style that well, but I never was impressed by it. And I don't remember losing to it much, if at all. It's not like I was like, oh no, they've got a Call Cease Mob Behemoth. I'm dead now. I don't remember that ever happening. It wasn't like one of those cards that, made me respect it. I think that is kind of the thing I was waiting for. I've talked about that on the show quite a bit, where if there's a controversial card that's difficult to evaluate and a lot of people are saying it's amazing and my gut tells me it's kind of not amazing like it does with this card, then what I'll usually do is let my opponents be my beta testers. And once they smash my face in with that card a few times, then I'll be like, all right, I'm, can't beat him, join him type thing. And I'm impressed enough to say, okay, this card's worth it. I'm going to go for it. And I'm willing to take a little bit of a beating to not be like super cutting edge on one card. But this one, I never did it myself and I never really lost to it. So it just remains a question mark for eternity.
Agreed. Though, there are some other cards that I thought were particularly controversial. One is Echoes of the Kin Tree.
That's a good one.
Enchantment for 1 and a white, and it had 2 and a white, bolster 1.
Great one.
And part of the reason is that people just had vastly differing opinions on it. We gave it a low rating. People did not like that just because this is the kind of card people do love. They're like, wow, you can get so many counters out of this card.
Right.
And we're like, well, yeah, this seems too slow to us. But then other people who have played the format a lot did have said, oh yeah, this card is a good finisher in sealed, or this card has a place in some decks. And honestly, I still don't like the card, but enough people do like the card that it's kind of interesting to me to see. I think part of it is that we underrated Mastery of the Unseen back in Fate Reforged.
Uh-huh.
And Echoes of the Kin Tree looks, at least surface level, somewhat similar, even though the card's power levels are wildly different.
Right.
And that, I think, caused at least me to want to reevaluate this again and make sure we weren't missing anything. I don't think we were, but I do know enough people who like it that it is reasonable. Yeah,
it's funny because this is the type of card that I think both you and I would like if it were very good. I agree. We overlooked Master of the Unseen. Basically, the life gain part, was the part that I think I didn't give enough credence to because it basically enabled itself to keep going off. And that was a kind of a 1-2 punch that I missed upon just only reading the card and immediately realized on playing against the card. But in this case, I love a mana sink, right? I love the fact that late in the game, after you've kind of expended all your resources in your top decking or whatever, you can just start pounding mana into this thing, and it doesn't matter what you have. As long as you have a creature that can attack or block, you'll start, grinding out a bunch of counters and kind of take over that mid to late stage of the game. But the efficiency is a big deal. I don't think this card is unplayable, but I think that it didn't fit in any of the natural decks that the format gave us. And I don't think that it fit very well into the bolster deck. I think you wanted bolster to come on your creatures. I think you wanted your creatures or your other permanents that affected the board, your removal spells like Enduring Victory to be your bolsters and to get your light walkers up in the air and that kind of stuff, because this was a very inefficient way to get +1/+1 counters on your creature. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. It is a slow, grindy endgame card basically for a control deck. And that didn't really pop up that much with white in the format. I mean, you had a few tools for that. You had your Student of Ojutai, that kind of thing that could help you go long, but it didn't seem like white was perfectly suited to it. So my gut tells me that this card's decent, but it needs the right deck, and that deck doesn't pop up too much in the format.
No, it doesn't. And the last underrated card, controversial card I want to talk about was Jamoka's Gift, the 4 and a green instant bolster 4, because some people thought this card was just a bomb. Like, it was just literally incredibly good. You just cast it and you win. And some people thought it was kind of unplayable, or at least very marginal. I think it is deck dependent, because I think both those statements can be true depending on your deck, but it was funny how wildly different people's ratings of this card were.
Where did you come down? Would you pick it pretty highly if you were in green?
I would not. I generally tended not to draft decks that really wanted it. It's good at the top of your curve. It's good with cards like Lightcaster or, dare I say it, Conifer Strider. But for the most part, I was not looking to take a non-removal spell that wasn't a creature either that was vulnerable to removal.
Yeah, I had that, and both Luis and I will tell you what our most drafted cards were from the set. Our most drafted card from the set on Magic Online, and that might help explain why we weren't a huge fan of Gift of Dromoka later on. All right, so that was controversial cards. What were some notable first picks that would really set your course for the draft? Meaning that you open up your card, you take it, you're like, well, I know what we're doing. And, one of them that jumped out to me was Berserkers Onslaught. Now, I don't know if I actually ever first picked Berserkers Onslaught, but this is just one of the cards that jumped to my mind as if I had this early in the draft, I knew what I wanted to do, right? I wanted gore swines. I wanted 4-power creatures all over the place. I wanted high power, even if it was low toughness creatures, no problem. And I wanted to basically play the green-red deck. And that was what I was trying to do if I first picked or had an early pick Berserkers Onslaught. Were there any cards that stood out to you as okay, well, we're doing it. You pick one, some card and really move it on a strategy?
I didn't like the card much, but every now and then I drafted Skywise Teachings and just completely tried to draft the deck around it.
You poor soul. You just can't help yourself, can you? You're like, this reminds me somewhat of Goblin Slide. I will take it.
The funny thing was, Goblin Slide is a card that I think I liked more than I should have, and I will admit that, but I actually think Skywise Teachings is a legitimate card. Okay,
that was one you could build around and make a real deck?
You definitely could. I don't really advocate first picking it, but if I started out with a bunch of blue cards and then saw 4th or 5th pick Skywise Teachings, it was on. It was time.
Color best to pair it with? Was it white?
Actually, I think it was black. Okay. Even though white had the rebound cards were not the cards you wanted in a deck with Skywise Teachings. You don't want +2/+2s and protection from a color. Rather just take the good black removal spells. Coat with Venom Skywise Teachings was actually one of my favorite combos.
Well, that is kind of sweet. Yeah, I never got on the Skywise Teachings plan. I still think that card's just bad.
I guess you never really mastered the format then.
I'll live with that. All right, this is a big one. This is an LR long-standing Sunset Show one. What's the biggest groan test? So this is a card that your opponent plays it and you're just like, ugh. And, the original, I think, groan test passer was Overrun back in the day, which I used to soapbox about that card all the time. And then they made it go away.
Before I even really knew you, mm-hmm. I remember you talking so often about how little you liked Overrun.
Yeah, I hated it.
I remember just like, what is this Marshall's guy's deal? He just Overrun, I guess? I mean, sure.
Yeah, I really hated it. I felt like it was just bad for Limited in general. It was really funny. I don't know if you've heard this story, but I complained about that, and I complained about, what's it called? Mind Control a lot. Because especially I actually complained about Overrun and I really liked Mind Control because I took it really high and sometimes people didn't and they lost. And then I had a conversation with Aaron Forsyth, and he was like, well, we ran some numbers on these cards, you know, specifically on Overrun. And he's like, you'll be interested to know, you know, and that, you know, we've decided not to print this type of card at Uncommon because the win rate on them's too high or something like that. And I was like, really? And then he said this on Twitter. And so everybody's like, you killed Overrun. And I'm like, I guess. But then he also said, and by the way, Mind Control also will not be at Uncommon anymore because the numbers came back on that, you know, even better than Overrun or something like that. Yeah, that was back in the day. That was really funny. Anyway, but for this set,
you know what's funny is we were actually talking about that pretty recently. Dare I invoke the situation with the Tarmogoyf and the Burst Lightning from Grand Prix Vegas? Basically, Matt Nass and I, when we were walking to lunch, we were trying to figure out what is the biggest win percentage, or like how can you calculate the difference in win percentage of having one card versus another? And for the example we used was Comet Storm. Okay. So Overrun and Mind Control also, these exact stats came up because you're trying to figure out, you know, how much more likely is Comet Storm to win you a game, and what is the percent that it improves per game? You also draw it about, you know, maybe a half to a little less than half of the games, and there's, you know, potential 3 games in a match, and we did all that and just try to figure out exactly what the difference was. It's interesting. It's obviously just an estimate because you're dealing with just, you know, is Comet Storm 10% more likely to win you a game or 20% more likely to win you a game? I mean, who knows, right?
Right. Very difficult to say.
But it is cool having some amount of data, like when it comes to Mind Control and Overrun. Though one more thing about that sort of data is it does tend to overrate cards that got cast in a game.
That's right. That's the key, right?
The data that Aaron is actually talking about, Wizards has access to, is better than that, and so his data was actually, I think, accurate. But when people scrape all the matches, which like on MTG Goldfish or what have you, they can only see the cards that got cast in a game because they're watching replays. So cards like Magmatic Chasm are drastically overvalued because you only cast it to make creatures can't block when you're going to win the game. So that card looks like it wins the game all the time because it only gets cast on turns where the game ends.
Yes, and Overrun can fall into that category as well, where if you fall behind on creatures, if your opponent, you know, kills off your first 2 creatures and maybe you just draw 1 big creature but don't end up going wide on the board, you never end up casting your Overrun. Because you either win the game with your creature or you don't. And the times when you do cast Overrun, it usually wins you the game either immediately or the next turn. So,
yeah, I think that the real big takeaway, you know, irrational hatred of Overrun aside, is that Mind Control and cards like that have such a high win percentage, or they did in this case, that they moved them basically up to rare or never. And when you see a card like Illusory Gains, which was in Dragons, that was the Mind Control, but whenever they play a new creature, it jumps to that creature. You have to think, like, they probably don't think this is as good as Mind Control or they wouldn't print it. So
exactly. And that wasn't rare. And remember, straight up Mind Control was an Uncommon before. Yeah, our Limited has changed a lot even since I came.
The funny thing was, Persuasion is just also Mind Control. It's 3 blue enchanted, you control enchanted creature, was a rare in Odyssey. So it's just funny how that's just bounced around a little bit.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, so the one for this set, though, there's no Overrun in this set. So my groan test that I picked was one that it just is really a great card. I picked Dragonlord of Tarkir. Reason being that it was so difficult to win if that card hit the battlefield. Now, I'm not complaining. I mean, that's a 7-drop, like, you know, more power to you. You got a mythic 7-drop. It should probably win you the game. But I will say, being on the wrong end of a Dragonlord of Tarkir, you're like, really? Like, you just killed 2 of my good creatures, and I have to deal with an 8/8 flying trample that kills me in 2 turns if I don't do anything? I mean, the card is just completely absurd, and definitely drew a fair amount of groans, I think, whenever cast, because you're just like, all right, well, we were playing Fair Magic, and then you played that, and now the game is completely turned upside down. So that was my pick for it. Did you have any that you saw and you're like, oh no, not that thing again?
The Dragonlords as a whole were kind of like, ugh.
Yeah, Silumgar, I mean, ugh.
Silumgar, Ojutai, Dramoka, Kolagon. These were all cards that weren't beatable unless you had a way to kill them. But in the case of like Atarka, even if you killed Atarka, you still had just probably lost your board, or at least the best creature on it. I think Atarka is just the best card in the set. So
yeah,
it is for sure the card you least want to see your opponent put on the stack, unless you're smart and have a bunch of contradicts in your hand.
All right. So, yeah. So this next one maybe contradict was the biggest groan test from the person playing Atarka. What was the most frustrating bad card to lose to? And I use air quotes on bad card because, every card has its place for the most part. But, your opponent is playing their stuff. And then they play this stupid card, and you're like, really? I'm going to lose to that stupid card. And the one that came to mind for me was Battle Mastery, specifically on Conifer Strider, but just Battle Mastery in general was enough to just make me, put my head back and go, no, not like this.
So my very first draft in the format, I lost in the finals to Doc, one of the other streamers, because of Conifer Strider. And that was like, I was like, ugh, is that card actually good? Nah, that card's probably not good. It was just random and I lost to it. Then I lost to it like 4 more times over the course of the format, and it started to just dread and fear every time that card came out.
Conifer Strider specifically?
Yeah, it just was a card I would just keep losing to because it dodged removal spells, and if you pair it with enough pump spells, I would still just, there's not much you could do about it. I don't think the card was great. I think it was playable. It was definitely better than my first impression of it. But I just hated losing to it, and for some reason it just kept happening.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the card was really annoying. And Battle Mastery was the one that just made me so angry.
It's because it's like you combined a 1 out of 10 and like a 4 out of 10 to make a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's how math works, but it does in this case.
It does in this case. There's some type of bonus multiplier for playing 2 bad cards. But, it's funny because, we advise against that on the show pretty regularly, right? Don't play 2 bad cards to try to make 1 good card. But there you go. It does occasionally happen. Not good in the long term, though. All right. This is similar to the groan test sometimes, but what was the bombiest bomb? The card you just wanted to open, get one in your sealed pool. What was just the flat out windmill bomb of this format?
So I do think Atarka was the best card in the set, but Dragonlord Silumgar wasn't that far behind, and I pledge allegiance to the Dimir Guild, so I really wanted to just draft blue-black, and Dragonlord Silumgar was the perfect excuse to do so. There's no reason that you would really want Silumgar over Atarka, because I think Atarka was just a couple percentage points higher in terms of just how good it is, but I really wanted to draft blue-black, so I'd rather just open Dragonlord Silumgar.
I was the same, actually. And I don't know. I mean, I think Dragonlord Atarka and Dragonlord Silumgar are probably about on par. I mean, the difference between 6 and 7 mana is a wide gap. You don't get to just stock your deck with a bunch of ramp cards like you could if you were playing Constructed or whatever. So sometimes you have to naturally draw 7 of your lands. And, that we're talking turn 12, turn 13 a lot of times before you get to that point. And it's quite easy in this format to be dead by then, where if you knock off 2.5 turns off of that and bring it down to turn 10, turn 11, where you can play Silumgar. I mean, Silumgar was a complete game changer on the battlefield. If you put them in a vacuum, Atarka is clearly better, but that 1 mana difference does help shore it up quite a bit. I'd say they're pretty close.
I've put cards in a vacuum before. Trust me, none of them fare well. Silumgar, Atarka, random commons I've left on my floor.
I've seen the ones that you left in your trunk in Vegas.
Oh yeah, those just melted.
They just turned into like balls of goo. Yeah, but I'm on Silumgar as well for the similar reasons, though. Blue-black. I want to be blue-black. All right, here it is. What is the best common? We're going to go down each of the colors, and we're each going to say what we thought was the best common from the set. As you can see, Luis, on our notes, I have made my picks bold here. So, white. I picked Pacifism. Another couple that I put on the list as maybe possibles. Misthoof Kirin, Sandcrafter Mage came to mind, but I took Pacifism kind of in a route there.
Yeah, I think Pacifism's the best white common, and it's not particularly close. Misthoof Kirin, Sandcrafter Mage, like a light caster. These are cards that not only would you not take them over Pacifism to begin with, you would never take them over Pacifism. You would have 4 Pacifisms, and you'd still take a Pacifism for a Misthoof Kirin unless you were somehow on 6 creatures. So white was one of the least controversial colors when it comes to which the best common is.
That's right. Now, blue, more options here. So the ones that I put on the list for consideration were Gurmag Drowner, Palace Familiar, which we talked about earlier, Ojutai Summons, and Ojutai Interceptor, the 4/2 there. The Summons being, of course, the rebound that makes 2/2 flying djinns. You know what? I went out on a limb here, Luis, and I took Palace Familiar as my best blue common.
So I like Palace Familiar, and I don't disagree with taking it early. The reason I did not end up taking it over Gurmag Drowner or even Ojutai Summons a lot of the time is because Jeskai Sage and Sultai Emissary did such a good job of filling that slot. Having 2 commons and Fate Reforged in the for the deck that, is trying to exploit cards, it does offer a lot of backup. I'd much rather have 2 good, 2 Gurmag Drowners and 3 things to sacrifice to them than 4 or 5 things to sacrifice, but no Drowners. So I would tend of these cards to take the Drowner first, the Ojutai Summon second, the Palace Familiar third, and I think all of them are very far ahead of the Interceptor.
Yeah, the Interceptor is one of the interesting stories because I think coming in it looked like a solid card, and then its stock rose early. For some reason, people were really high on it, and then it kind of fell off. And I still have found it always kind of in the middle. I think it's decent, but not great. That's a really good point about the Palace Familiar, just that it's got a lot of competition for what it's trying to do, where Drowner and Summons doesn't, which makes them, a lot more valuable.
I think it's interesting. I really do like it when the best common in a color is not obvious. I think that's interesting. And for blue in particular, I don't think you necessarily want every color to be like that because having some clear winners is also good. But for blue, I liked that the top 3 were pretty interchangeable. And even the fourth, even Interceptor, sometimes it was the card you wanted. So in general, I would lean towards taking Drowner, but I could certainly see why you would take some of these other cards.
All right, now black, there was 2 cards that jumped out to me as being the best 2, but there was really only one I think that was the best, which was Flatten. The other card that I liked a lot was Vulturous Haven. I thought that card was fantastic, but I think Flatten was head and shoulders above anything else in black.
I don't think there's any real argument to be made for anything but Flatten. I think that Flatten, Aven, and Coat with Venom are the 3 best black commons, and in that order, I would generally take Aven over the Coat. But yeah, you're always taking Flatten. Flatten is just a great card.
Yeah, I mean maybe the best common in the set. It's up there.
I would say it's the best common in the set because even though it doesn't kill things like pacifism gets exploited by exploit the mechanic that lets you toss your creatures for value, and It one of the things I always found so funny about Flatten was that Throttle, the exact same card as Flatten, but 1 mana more expensive, was in cons. I just found that just like a kind of weird bookending of the format.
Yeah, I'm changing my pick on red, though I still don't.
You're not allowed to do that. Actually,
I just did. The wonders of Google Documents has allowed me to make a different word bold. So the red ones I chose were Sarkhan's Rage, Twin Bolt, Tail Slash, and Atarka Ifrit. And I'll tell you what, my heart is actually with Atarka Ifrit. That's kind of my special little child there. I loved Atarka Ifrit. I thought the card was fantastic. Did a lot of work in the format. Could kill things even with the ping. If left unchecked, it did huge amounts of damage. It was great with Temur Battle Rage. Flexible card. I'm a big fan of Atarka Ifrit, but removal's removal. And I ended up saying that Sarkhan's Rage was the best red common.
I think that this is the best example of there being no consensus because Sarkhan's Rage, Twin Bolt, Tail Slash, and Atarka Ifrit were all 4 in the running. I don't actually have a firm opinion. I would generally tend to want Twin Bolt followed by Slash, followed by Rage, followed by Ifrit, but they're all so close that by the time you have options of multiples, often you'll have taken a couple cards, then you can change your opinion. So, or rather, your valuation will change. All these cards are great, and they do the job. I mean, they all kill something. They all threaten your opponent pretty effectively. Tail Slash and Twin Bolt more of it by removing blockers, but Sarkhan's Rage and Atarka Ifrit can't actually just kill your opponent.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I actually had Twin Bolt lined up, but I think it is Sarkhan's Rage. Like, I think that red wanted to be aggressive in this format, as it is often the case. And, I want big 5-drop removal spells in my quick red decks because I want to curve out with creatures and then kill your big blocker. And the fact that Sarkhan's Rage can hit players is huge. It's a lot of damage, 25% of their starting life total. Like, it's a big hit. And then on top of it, the 2 damage that you very often take from it, it doesn't matter that much if you're trying to beat down. Usually you're being the aggressor and you have some life total to play with anyway. So that's why I went with Sarkhan's Rage.
I never saw the 2 life matter really, or And very rarely did you not take that 2 damage.
Yeah, I think I always took it.
You basically always had the dragons in play. I found it very odd that this was the 6th Dragon Matters card. There's the cycle of the 5 uncommons that you can reveal when you play. And this is number 6. It's common and you can't reveal it. Only cares if it's in play. That just felt weird to me.
That does feel a little like is kind of dangling out there, right? Like, wait, why are you here? Yeah, doesn't line up with what you would expect. Green. I only picked 1 card for this. There was only 1 card that really jumped out to me as being clearly the best green common, and for me it was Epic Confrontation.
I don't think there's much of an argument here either. I think the removal spell is the best common that's happened in multiple colors. Airy Bowmasters was a fairly strong card.
Very
a 4
good
mana,
card.
3/4 reach, and you could flip it up for 6 mana and make it a 4/5. Yeah, that was a fine card, but you're never really taking that over Epic Confrontation. This is green has a way to kill things, and that is kind of what it wants.
Yeah, that card was super good at it too. Okay, what about the best uncommon? Now this one's tough, Luis. I just pulled 1, 2, 3. I picked 5 cards that jumped out to me. 4 of them probably deserve to be on the list, and 1 of them is just one of my favorites. But
and the other's Youthful Scholar.
Yes. So Youthful Scholar I put on the list, but I'll be honest, it's not as good as the other 4. Rakshasa Gravecaller. I know a lot of people that just call it Grave Titan. They just make no distinguish, between this and Grave Titan. Ukud Cobra.
That's a better analogy than most. I used to call sensory deprivation. That's 1 blue. Enchanted creature gets -3, -0. I used to call that card Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, the blue Swords to Plowshares.
I would say that the Grave Titan Rakshasa Gravecaller comparison is a little more apt.
Yes, it is. Ukud Cobra I put on the list as well, just because I was never disappointed with the performance of that card. This is the 3rd black card, by the way, on the list now. Ultimate Price. Maybe just the best removal spell in the format. It's high up there. There is some issues with the fact that it doesn't hit some of the biggest bombs and some of the uncommons, but it hits everything else in the most efficient way possible. And then I also put Roast on the list as well, just because it is a very efficient red removal spell that also suffers from some issues. Not being able to hit the dragons in the format is pretty raw. But it is still one of the premium removal spells in the format. If I were to distill this list down, though, to 2, it would be the Gravecaller and the Ultimate Price. Those are the 2 that really stand out to me. And picking one of them is very difficult. I actually just don't know which one's better. Thankfully, they don't show up in the same pack effectively ever. But those are the 2 that really I narrowed it down to.
My heart says Rakshasa Gravecaller because I really like the exploit deck, but my brain says Ultimate Price. At the end of the day, Ultimate Price is super efficient. It kills a lot of the creatures you really care about killing. It doesn't kill the multicolor dragons, sure, but it just kills almost everything that you care about. I think it probably has to be Ultimate Price, but I think the Gravecaller is not far behind, and I do agree that those are I would order them as Ultimate Price number 1, Rakshasa Gravecaller number 2, Ukud Cobra number 3, Roast number 4, though I'm less confident on the difference between Roast and Cobra. I like black a little more than I like red, and sometimes Cobra just ends the game, basically.
Yeah, Cobra can be so good. I think if I was forced to choose between Ultimate Price and Gravecaller, I might actually just take the Gravecaller. One of the things that I love in a card, and we talk about it on the show pretty frequently, is the ability to help me come back from being behind. And this card stabilizes the board in a huge way the turn you play it. It almost doesn't matter what card you sacrifice to it for exploit. And even in the rare spot where you don't have anything to exploit to it, it's still huge on its own. Or if you exploit itself, it still makes 2 blockers that can trade for 2 or whatever for 2 small creatures. I can't say anything bad about Ultimate Price. I mean, it's probably the best removal spell in the format. So, I'm not going to, take it to Ultimate Price, but I actually think Gravecaller is the best uncommon in the set. What's the worst card in the set? The biggest blank, the most last picked. I went through the list and I found a list of real all-stars here, Luis, that we can pick from. Some of the ones that I found were Foul Tongue Shriek, Virulent Plague, which is kind of not playing fair, but whatever, it's still terrible. Vandalize, never saw anybody play that. Revealing Wind, that's the fog, boo. Sight of the Scale Lords, the one that cares about how many 4 toughness or greater cards you have, or it makes those better or whatever. Gate Smasher? Here's a quick quiz. What does Gate Smasher do?
So I was just thinking to myself, what does Gate Smasher do?
I'm going to get you.
So I believe it costs...
You have a remarkable memory.
I believe it costs 3 to cast. And
that is true.
I believe it costs 3 to equip.
That is also true.
It gives a creature, I think, +3/+0 and trample, and has to have 4 toughness.
That is exactly what it does.
I'm not even.
You are amazing. I know you're not. You're just insane. I while going through was like, wait, what is this? It just like felt like I'd never seen the card. Yeah, it can only be attached to creatures with toughness 4 or greater. You have to have something fat anyway. And then, for the fact that you've got this 4 toughness creature, you have to pay 3 to cast and 3 to equip, which is a significant amount of mana, and then it makes it +3/+0 and trample. That one might be it. But there's a competitor here at last. Keeper of the Lens.
So I
this
think
poor guy.
Yeah, well, Keeper of the Lens was somehow more playable than the whatever the Revealing Lens card was initially.
The one that he's holding, yeah.
Yes, but the thing I find funny about this set of cards is it's got multiple cards on it that people explain to me why I was underrating them. And I think that it's just kind of emblematic of set review season as a whole. And those cards are Foul Tongue Streak and Sight of the Scale Lords. Because both those cards are cards that we just gave very low ratings to. And people explained, they're like, no, but you could Drain Life them for 6 with Foul Tongue Streak. You could play Sight of the Scale Lords and attack them with 3 giant Vigilance creatures. And it's like, you're stating true facts, but you're also not constructing an argument as to why these cards are good. In fact, these cards are not good. No one ever cast them. They were just completely unplayable.
Yeah, they were completely unplayable. Yeah. Of course, what those hapless souls were falling for was best case scenario mentality, right? They were viewing a card and immediately viewing it in a scenario in which it was stellar, or at least performing at maximum capacity. And the fact is that if you want to be good at evaluating cards, you have to be well-rounded about it. And what that means is you have to imagine the scenarios where the card is not operating at maximum value. So you've got one creature with your Foul Tongue Shriek or whatever. You've got no creatures with 4 toughness or greater, and you've got your stupid Sight of the Scale Lords. This happens, right? Like even a middle grade scenario where somebody says to you, well, okay, I play a 4 toughness creature, I play Sight of the Scale Lords. Like, opponent kills your 4 toughness creature sometimes. That happens. That's just a very regular occurrence. Most creatures with 4 toughness are worth killing anyway at some point during the course of the game. And now your Sight of the Scale Lords does stone nothing, and you paid 5 mana for it, right? Or you're getting beaten down. Your Foul Tongue Shriek doesn't look great when you're getting beaten down, right? And or when you don't have a bunch of creatures or whatever. So, yeah. So what gets your vote here, though? One of these has to take the cake as worst card in the set. Just that one is just at the end of the pack, and you're like, you're still here. God, you never get picked. What's the one?
I almost have to just go with Gate Smasher, because I'm still proud of myself for knowing what the card does.
I can't believe that you passed that test, to be honest.
I smashed it, you could even say. Or I could. And part of it is because it's one of the the worst cards in the set, biggest blank, but also looks, I think, to some degree plausible.
Mm-hmm.
Because it looks like it does something. Whereas when people, the cards that trick people are the most pernicious. People don't look at Vandalize or Revealing Wind and think, yeah, this card has this great upside, I should play this. But they do look at Gate Smasher or Sight of Scale Lords or Foul Tongue Shriek, and they think, I can actually think of a situation where this card is good. And then they put it in their deck and they lose even harder. Whereas the cards that are like, 5 mana for a 1/1, people are like, yeah, of course you just don't play this card. But
because it doesn't even trigger that best case scenario mentality, because their best case isn't good at all. Yeah.
The cards that have enough potential upside that people can construct a scenario where they're good, even if that scenario doesn't actually happen. And yeah, that those are the cards I find the worst, because I don't like it when I see people play these cards and lose with them and get frustrated. So hopefully they avoid that.
It is a learning opportunity, though. That's the good news. Mine was Keeper of the Lens. That poor guy in his crystal ball holding that lens of clarity was at the last card in the pack so often. I just remember, like, you know, they throw you that last card, and in the previous set, it was always one of those auras, you know, the cycle of auras. I can't remember what they're called, but here it's like, it's going to be a Keeper of the Lens. Yep, there he is, right to the bottom of the pile. Next up, which card was most begrudgingly playable? The card you're like, oh, fine, you're off the bench, you're on the team. For me, it was Einok Artillerist, the 4/1. It was like, this card's not very good, but I ended up playing it like a little more often than I thought I would, and I'm like, okay, fine. Like, you're good enough. You're just strictly better than Goreswine, right? Like, you're just definitely better than that card, and I play plenty of Goreswine, so in you go, Einok Artillerist. Did you have any begrudgingly playable cards that you're just like, sure, I guess you're in this time?
Well, I have a card that I probably should have been more begrudging, but that, but I still played it. It was Wandering Tomb Shell. That's 3 and a black for a 1/6. That's the whole card. And
there's a lot of flavor text on that card.
Oh yeah. Honestly, I probably should have been more unhappy than I was to play it, but I kind of do like blocking, and that card did a lot of blocking, though. I will not defend how powerful it is.
Yeah, that's a good, great candidate for begrudgingly unplayable. Is there a card you're going to miss drafting?
I think the card I'll miss drafting most is Gurmag Drowner, just because it was just a fun, good common that did a lot of what I liked in a game. It rewarded you for building around it. I like the synergy. It let you dig through your deck, and it let you get card advantage. It just did a lot of cool things, and it wasn't overly powerful. It wasn't like, yeah, you play this card and it's great. It's more like, if you do some work, this card can be pretty good.
I liked Youthful Scholar. I know this is starting to become a bit of a theme here, but I really liked that card. You know, it had hints of Muldrifter in it, and I loved playing it, you know, on a ground that was kind of gummed up and just looking at my opponent like, go, you know, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to use a removal spell on this thing? Are you going to crash a creature into it? I'm going to get value out of this, and this thing's going to propel me into the late game. And of course, you know, doing something ungodly like playing Gurmag Drowner to sack your Youthful Scholar was just an absurd, you know, display in front of your opponent of you drawing like a million cards. So I like that. What was the, we had this, this is actually from back in the day with John, where we would say, what's the louxiest card?
Yep.
Yeah. But we've got, what's the martialiest and what's the LSVEist cards here. And mine was, ta-da, Youthful Scholar. I just love the value on those.
You've only mentioned it 17 times so far.
Yeah.
I was looking at the show notes before, and I'm like, I wonder if Marshall just copy pasted a bunch, because I keep seeing Youthful Scholar here.
No, I actually picked it out each time. Look, I got it. I mean, if you ask me a year from now, after I've forgotten most of the format and kind of don't remember it that well, and, you know, just be like, well, what was the card that really jumped out to you? You know, I'll think like, oh, Mistraven from this set. You know, there's cards that jump out, and it's going to be Youthful Scholar. So I had to put it in here for Martialist. What about LSVEist?
This one's not too tough. It's just Skywise Teachings. I briefly thought about Clone Legion, but Skywise Teachings really does exemplify what I'm trying to do, which is cast a lot of spells, pay too much mana for an effect, and eventually win the game.
You know, I think you've maybe misunderstood here. This isn't the card that you like the most. This is the one that defines you. And I think that given that, we should probably change both of our answers. And I'm actually just going to answer for you.
Okay.
The LSVEist card here is Clone Legion, definitely, as it costs an exorbitant amount of mana and does something very cool and gives you kind of a goal. And the Martialist card is obviously Marshulk, right?
Yeah,
like,
I guess that is just a huge oversight.
Yeah, I don't know how you let me get away with putting a card I actually just liked in this slot. It's just,
well, I think both Skywise Teaching and Clone Legion again exemplify exactly what I'm all about.
No, you're right. You are
apparently
right.
Paying too much mana for an effect.
Yeah, I like taking the much more expensive one if we're going to pick two similar examples, because that's more you, man. I
have both written down.
Yes. Okay. Well, then so those changes have been submitted to the to the powers that be.
The powers that be, as in our shared Google Docs.
Yeah. What's Marshall's soapboxiest card? So this is, you know, going back to my days of ranting about Overrun. There's often a card in a set that will just, you know, people will come up and tell me how good it is, and I'm like, stop telling me this card's good. And I actually came up with one. Upon originally pondering this, I thought, you know, there really wasn't one out of the set that got me, but there actually was. It was Commune with Lava. a card that I just think is garbage. I think that card is just bad and that you shouldn't high pick it. You should almost never play it. I think it's just a really bad card. And I kept having people come up and tell me the ways that this card's actually good, or, that I'm not thinking it through. And I'm like, well, explain it to me. And I'm like, okay, there was a couple of little timing things that I did take for granted, or say, okay, no, that does actually bump it up a little bit, but I still would just not actually play this card. Really at any time. It's just not what I want to be doing in my red decks, among other things. So definitely Communeth Lava was my most soapboxiest. That's a card I just kind of tilted off on multiple times to people who asked me about it. So.
Oh, I was in some of those discussions. I believe there's room on the soapbox for two of us.
Definitely.
Just because this is, again, one of those best case scenario cards.
Hold on, let me pull you up on the soapbox. All right, now you're here. Go ahead.
I can cast this card. I can play a land. I can play a spell. I can do all. It's like, no. You can pay 6 mana to draw 1.5 cards.
Right. Assuming you're still alive by that point.
Right. Yeah. But another card I had some nice discussions about was Collected Company, because I happened to make the mistake, and never do this, is I mentioned math in an article. And it is a mistake. You'll have so many people telling you why your math is wrong.
Oh, duly noted. I'm not all this
stuff. Just not a good idea. Luckily for me, Frank Carson ran the numbers and said that my approximation was okay. So I consider that a win for my.
Oh, that's definitely a win. Are you kidding me? That's submitting it to the real authorities there, and it came back up positive. You're good to go. All right, let's both of us step down off of our soapbox. We'll leave Communeth Lava on top of it. Is there a card, Luis, that you still have to read when it's cast against, somebody plays it, you're like, all right, now I know what this does, but I'm going to pick it up and read it just to make sure again? I'm assuming no, given the fact that you remembered what that stupid equipment did somehow. But
I was going to say Gatecrasher is the card I always have to read.
That explains how you knew it still.
Actually, the card that I've had to read, I just remember reading it twice distinctly, is Dragon Whisper. And that's red. It's first of all, it's mythic, which obviously explains part of it. But red for a 2/2. You can pay a red to give it flying. You can pay 1 and a red to give it +1/+0. And then there's Formidable, pay 4 red, put a 4/4 dragon into play.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, and it's so close to Kargan Dragon Lord, which also costs red for a 2/2, that I just kind of conflate them. Like, wait, which one does which exactly? So I remember not knowing what that card did when it got played against me.
Yeah, the one for me was Crater Elemental. And it was always because I'm like, all right, I know that the number 8 comes into play here, and I know the number 6 matters. I can't remember exactly how things go from that. I just, is it like, can they tap it and sack it to 2/8, or is it 6, or does it get +8/+0? Or, I could never quite remember which number went where. And then also it's got 2 different costs, for activating it or whatever. It's like red, tap it, sack it, and the other one's like 2 and a red to do the other part or whatever. And I just remember always needing to double check exactly what that thing was capable of. And it turns out it does 4 damage, it has 6 toughness, and it gets 8 power if you have Formidable and you pay all the mana. So that's what it does. Card's great, by the way. I like that card.
It is a bizarre card. Also, sets its base power to 8, so there's some kind of weird interactions there.
Mm-hmm. What's your most drafted card on Magic Online?
So I noticed both of our cards are the same. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason is that, and the card, by the way, is Sidisi's Faithful, the 1 mana 0/4 that exploits to bounce a creature, it's actually twofold. One is that it's underrated.
Yes.
I believe the card is underrated. And the other is that even if it was correctly rated, you would get them pretty late. It's a late pick. The cards that every single format end up as the most drafted for me are the cards that hit the nexus of should be a 7th, 5th through 7th pick, but people always pass it 10th. You're never going to have Flatten as your most drafted card because everyone's just going to take it in the first couple picks. Even if they underrate it, it's not by that much. But when you take a card that's already should be near the back of the pack and people underrate it even more than that, that's how you have the recipe for, one of the most drafted cards.
Yeah. Also blue. All right. This is, we've got kind of two takeaways here, or 2 kind of big things I want to hit before we wrap up the show, Luis. And the first one is, I want to ask you, You're a game designer by trade. You obviously understand how Magic works really well. You also understand how games work in general, which gives you a totally different lens to look at these things under. So I want to know, and I want you to, put on your designer developer hat here and give us the raw deal. From a design development perspective, how did the set fare? How were the mechanics? What were some of the wins for the set, and what were some of the losses? Some of the things that were left on the table or whatever from your perspective.
One of the things I thought was, I guess maybe that this was more like my personal issue, is that I feel like that the rebound cards didn't actually play incredibly well. It's a very different feel than Rise, which had rebound. Part of it is there was no removal spells with rebound because it was all in blue and white, and a lot of it was just kind of situational cards. So I guess it's kind of interesting that Artful Maneuver, you get to play it as a combat trick, then next turn you can play it as a +2/+2 before you attack. So it's just very different in those two scenarios. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it was a combination of the power level not being very high or the effects not feeling super cohesive, but again, the blue-white deck didn't get there for me, and as a result, Rebound was not that exciting. I was very excited when I found out Rebound was coming back. It didn't really feel all that special to me.
Yeah, I agree. It also felt like it wanted a certain deck behind it. Some of the rebound cards in the set were Artful Maneuver, so that's +2/+2 until end of turn for a creature, Center Soul, Great Teacher's Decree, and Ojutai's Breath, along with Ojutai Summons and a few others. But, and Void Squall was another one, and Uncommon, and all of these just scream to me tempo deck. Right? Out a bunch of flyers or a few threats and then just ride these rebound cards to the victory. And I don't think I did that a single time in the format.
I just did not see that come together at all. And again, it being low power level is not an indictment by itself, but I just feel like rebound could have been a lot more interesting. And I guess maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe it was just that we're kind of spiky and we don't want to play cards that don't work for the winning matches part. And that's not what these cards did for the most part.
Okay.
Another one, I think the one I actually disliked the most was Formidable, just because it felt like Ferocious. It wasn't. I don't know how this played very differently. Yes, it was total power, not just one creature, but I don't know. It's either on or it's off, and it felt like basically the same trigger condition. It didn't feel very different from Ferocious, not enough to make me think, oh wow, yeah, this is pretty interesting.
No, it didn't feel interesting. It felt fine. Right? It never felt bad, like a bad mechanic, but it certainly didn't push any boundaries or anything like that. It felt like a pretty conservative call, coming off of Ferocious.
The good part is, there was a number of the set mechanics which I thought worked out really well. Prowess wasn't technically in the set, but again, Student of Ojutai, Cunning Breeze Dancer, Strong Arm Monk, there were cards that effectively had prowess.
Yes.
They just did. And I think that was pretty cool. I think it did a good job of kind of, coming out of Cons and Fate Reforged, which both had prowess. Now Fate Reforged Dragons, you could still build a deck with prowess cards in it and not feel like you were barking up the wrong tree. Plus, prowess plays well. We're going to see it as an evergreen mechanic now, and I think it does work as that. I think it's a good, simple mechanic that is interesting.
Okay.
I also do like, of course, that prowess just plays into what I like to do anyway, but, that's cool too.
What about Dash? Where you come down on Dash?
I don't think Dash was bad. I don't think it was fantastic. Basically, Dash, it offers you an extra mode on all your creatures with Dash, which is cool, but they don't really do that much. They don't play that differently whether you dash them or not. Whether you dash a Mardu Scout and attack for 3 and then have it come back, or you just cast it then next turn attack for 3, you're not getting a very different play experience. And even though there was Warbringer and Ambuscade Shaman, there still didn't feel like a dash deck, and dash cards don't really combine well with each other. Drawing multiple dash cards is actually an anti-combo, because if you dash any of them, you're making all the other dash cards harder to dash because you end up with so many cards in your hand.
Yeah, so, you're actually incentivized to just play them out as regular creatures and dash one at kind of the end of it.
Right. And that's fine. The Dash was costed so that you didn't really feel that bad no matter what you were doing with Dash. I would have liked to see more creatures that have cool attack triggers with Dash. Like Goblin Heel Cutter was a really awesome one.
What about Bolster?
Bolster was good. It played pretty straightforward. I don't recall very many times when I played on either side where I had a removal spell and Bolster got around it, because Bolster, of course, happens, it's not targeted. So if you kill a creature in response, it'll just go on to a different creature. But I never really ended up in a situation where that was super relevant, and I didn't all that often end up in a situation where bolster, because it goes on the lowest toughness creature, was very restrictive. So it did not feel that different from a normal giant growth type effect, which is fine. Having it play like other combat tricks you use it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. Going over the list, we just talked about the prowess type cards: formidable, rebound, bolster, dash. None of these have really been a home run in my mind, right? Again, I don't think any of them were failures, but I don't really view any of these yet as mechanics where I'm like, that was sick, right? Like, remember when we got to play formidable? I don't think that sentence is going to come out of my mouth at any point in the future where I'm going to look back fondly on formidable, right? I'm not going to look back and say, what were they thinking? Formidable, oh my God. But it's just sort of kind of forgettable, right? It's just and I think a lot of these are
it's formidable, not forgettable.
Yeah, well, I think it might transform over a little bit in hindsight. But that does bring us to exploit, which is one that I actually thought was really cool. What was your take on exploit?
Well, I love playing with it. I think that it was a little complex from a rules/wording perspective. Like, you just read an exploit card and you're like, whoa, what is going on? But, it played really well, and it was well supported in the set. It felt cohesive. You could play a very minor exploit theme or a very heavy exploit theme, and they both felt legitimate. I think exploit was my favorite of the mechanics, and it was the one that least felt like a rehash of a previous mechanic, whereas, dash, bolster, rebound, formidable, prowess, none of these felt, even the ones that were actually new, most of them were not. Most of them weren't new, and the ones that were new felt like they weren't, which, it does take away a little bit of the excitement, whereas exploit doesn't. Exploit was just awesome.
Now, there is one other mechanic that sort of, dare I call this a new mechanic? We had Megamorph, and I'm really curious to hear what you say about Megamorph, because, well, I want to know what you think about it as a mechanic, but also I want to know what you think about the name.
Well, I think the name Megamorph is kind of ridiculous. I also think that it was just Morph. It didn't play that differently from Morph. If there was more of a ++1 counter theme, which, there actually, funnily enough, was in cons, I could see Megamorph being more of a thing. But it just felt like they just wanted to put Morph in the set, so they just put Morph in the set, and they costed their creatures at one more because they were going to be one bigger. So yeah.
I remember my initial reactions to Megamorph were, okay, we probably could have picked a better name here, guys, right? Like, this just makes you really excited, like something insane is going to happen when you flip it up, and it's like you get a +1/+1 counter, which is. It matters for limited. It's not that it doesn't matter. It's just not really exciting. And when, for whatever reason, there's like this hierarchy of words, and mega is one of the highest ones you can do. There's like ultra and, a few others up there, but, where this came in was much lower on the scale. So the naming never really clicked for me, but honestly, I don't really care that much about the name. Kind of want to know how it plays. And I thought, well, this is a nice twist on Morph, because Morph is already pretty complex, right? It gives you different modes that you can cast creatures in and all that. And then this one gives you basically a whole nother mode, right? Because if you cast it face up versus casting it face down and flipping it up, that's a different thing, right? And where with the normal Morph, if you got late in the game, sometimes you just started casting them face up, but that was the same as if you had turned them face up, the other way. So it was like, this gave you a different dimension on it. As it actually played, not as much. I remember thinking like, okay, it's kind of cool. Like, it incentivizes you to flip it up as a morph, but that's often what you want to do anyway. And so it didn't end up being really that deep. It just kind of felt like there was just morph in the set to me.
Yeah. And I don't know what problem.
Which I love morph.
Yeah. Morph's a great mechanic, and it just felt a little odd. I guess Dragons was kind of it was the alternate timeline of cons. And so it just had a lot of same or similar mechanics, and morph just felt basically the same.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's funny because when I look back at this, I do feel like they were conservative. I feel like, R&D was like, oh, let's keep things solid here, right? It doesn't feel like this was a set that they were saying, let's hit this thing out of the park for limited, right? It feels more like they were saying, let's get this right? Like, let's make sure that there's nothing horribly flawed about this set for limited. And I think they did a really good job with that. It's easy to forget, the days of playing, Avacyn Restored Limited or whatever, where it's fundamentally feels off and everybody's really unhappy about it. This didn't touch that for me. This felt like a solid, balanced, reasonable format that was fun to play, that's already a B plus or something. I mean, it's just hard to even get that. But that being said, it does feel like they didn't really push the boundaries much here. They renamed Morph to Megamorph and changed it a little bit. We got 2 or 3 mechanics back from a set we had the previous set, and we got a couple of new mechanics that didn't really feel new. So this wasn't one of the sets that really pushed boundaries for me, from a customer perspective.
I certainly wouldn't put pushing boundaries on the list of things that Dragons did. I think it delivered good gameplay. And going back to your original point where it felt like a core set, I hadn't thought of it in that way, but it did feel like a core set, and kind of part of that was I hit my draft cap a little earlier than I do with some sets. Mm-hmm. Because, core sets are fun and I do enjoy drafting them, but I don't draft them 50 times. So I think that Dragons, there were a lot of things you could do, but kind of like 2 colors, not super high on the synergy list. Those formats tend to hold me for a little less time.
Before we move on to our last question, do you feel like the format was dragony enough?
No, I think that was one of my biggest complaints. I kind of alluded to that earlier. Mm-hmm. It was called Dragons of Tarkir. There were lots of cards that said dragons on them, but like the cycle of uncommon dragons that all had Megamorph, they were all just so mediocre. They weren't good cards, and that made it tough to have dragons in play, especially since you would not flip them up very often or hardcast them very often. There just weren't the density of dragons just wasn't there. And as a result, the set did not feel like Dragons of Tarkir. Like, in Constructed, it does. In Constructed, we have all these decks that have tons of dragons in them. Haven of the Spirit Dragon's a big card. And that's cool. I do like all that. I just think in Limited, did you ever draft a deck that was like, I care about having dragons in this deck, and I get a lot of benefits by doing so?
Nope.
Yeah, not a single time did it even come close. You did have decks where you had a dragon in it, and you're like, oh, hell yeah, I've got a dragon.
This is sweet, yeah. Do you think that they should have pushed harder in that direction? Maybe made some common dragons or something like that. I know that there's a lot of baggage that comes with decisions like that. Would you have pushed for that, or do you think? Because I think one thing that you touched on briefly there, Luis, that I think is really important here is that I do feel like they really crushed the dragons thing for Constructed, and I think that's a big checkbox to hit. Getting dragons, in people's hands, in Limited is kind of dangerous, right? It's just like if everybody's, has these crazy dragons flying around, makes the format kind of insane. But getting them in the hands of Standard players where they're excited to play dragon cards is a big game, because that has not always been the case at all. And they really nailed that out of the park.
I completely agree. And I like the effect that it's had in Standard. I think that this is a very good Standard format. It would have been cool if it was a little bit more present and Limited. I don't think that's easy. I'm not saying I have a good solution to it. I guess you can just work on having, maybe depending on what concept of dragon you're using. If they all have to have flying, I can't really imagine having a green common flyer, really.
Yeah.
But maybe you just have maybe you have like 2 cycles of uncommons and have the power level a little bit higher, and then have more cards that care about dragons. You just increase the density just so it happens more often. But in general, it wasn't. It may not have been dragons in Limited. It certainly was dragons in Constructed, and I think the gameplay was overall good in the set. I don't have any complaints about the actual set.
Yeah. All right. Before we take off, I've got one big question and then a quick small question. The big one is, what did this format teach you? How did it make you a better player at Limited? What are the takeaways that we're going to take away from Dragons of Tarkir as we kind of transition over to Origins?
I think that the value I most got out of Dragons was in our card evaluation, since we mentioned earlier how
I teach you a lot of stuff. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Well, but that's unquestionable. The fact that Zephyr Scribe ended up being a very marginal borderline common and Palsmir was one of the best, that was a little eye-opening. It's like, that's interesting. I mean, obviously I know that context matters. Different sets have different valuations. Cards that are good in one set can be bad in the other. But it was interesting how much better some of the cards ended up being than I thought they'd be. And that makes me want to just be careful the next time I evaluate cards. It's hard to do a set review without having played the set a bunch. That is the situation we're always going to be in, because you want to review the set before it really gets into people's hands. But just how far off you can be sometimes is a lesson on how much context matters in Magic and how interesting that is.
Yeah, for me, the takeaways were from a big picture. I learned that even if R&D doesn't necessarily push big boundaries for limited, I can still have a great time drafting the format. Again, I go back to comparing it to like a core set where they tend to not push boundaries too hard there, on purpose. They're trying to keep the boundaries a little bit smaller traditionally on a core set, on an M set, so that it'll be a little more accessible to new players. And I always appreciated that there. I had a little bit higher hopes here. And even if they didn't quite push them that far, I still had a great time drafting the format, and we'll look back on it fondly and say, okay, that was cool. But I'm definitely ready, to move on to the next thing. The other thing that I think I'll take away from this, and I take away this from most formats these days, to be fair, but is I'm always keeping tabs on what limited looks like from a bigger picture, right? Because things have changed. I've written a few columns about it. You and I have talked about it on the show. The removal's different. The overall card quality is more flat now. It's more compressed. There's fewer completely terrible cards and completely ridiculous cards, especially when we're talking about the commons. And that changes the way that we have to use our tools and our ideas on the show, and we have. I mean, if you listen to a show from 3 or 4 years ago, we'll have some of the similar concepts, but the way that we apply them is much different these days. And every new block that comes out that we get to go really deep on, and we had Dragons forever. I mean, it was months that we had this set to draft. That's another data point that we can use to see which direction our friends in R&D are taking limited. And I don't mean, Dragons, I mean limited in general, because there are changes that have happened, and they've been gradual, but each one lets us know kind of where it's going. And from what I've seen, it's going in the same direction here. Things are getting more evened out. The card quality is getting flatter, less spikes in that. And then the other thing I'm going to keep an eye on, of course, are the rares. In Fate Reforged, it felt like the rares got a little too good, a little too hard to interact with, but they kind of came back down to earth here with the exception of the mythic rare Dragon Lords. Everything else was pretty palatable, I think. Even the Planeswalkers. We opened a Planeswalker in our Crack-A-Pack today, and we're like, nah, we'll take a removal spell over it. So interesting stuff to keep our tabs on. Let's put a stamp on this thing, Luis. What's your favorite card in the format? You already know mine.
Are we allowed to name cards we've used for prior answers?
Yes. Please do.
That'd be Skywise Teachings. I think between Goblin Slide and Skywise Teachings, I'm not going to see this effect again anytime soon, because why would you? We've already seen 2 versions of it, and it's a very niche effect. And so I'm going to miss it. I had a good time drafting it, and I still think both these cards were underrated, even though I will not provide data to back that up.
For me, it was obviously Youthful Scholar. That was a card that really jumped out to me from the beginning. Value. It's that simple. I love me some value, and I thought Youthful Scholar was one of the best ways to get it. All right, that's going to do it for our Dragons of Tarkir Sunset show. I want to remind you of a few things. The first one is that this show is brought to you each and every week by channelfireball.com. Make sure you check out their website for a full selection of singles and sealed product, as well as a whole bunch of awesome free content, videos, draft videos, standard videos, modern videos. You can find, of course, write-ups about decks in text form, so a bunch of articles by some of the best players in the world, and even podcasts. You can find constructed resources there, as well as limited resources, all on channelfireball.com. And next week, it's that time. Magic Origins set review show, Commons and Uncommons, is next week. I know I can't wait for it, Luis. I'm starting to, drink a lot of water and, get a little exercise in so that I can power through that thing. But I think the set looks really fun. It looks like they're kind of blowing it out, as effectively the last core set. So I'm super excited to do that. And we'll be here, both you and I, next week to do the set review. So thanks for hanging. We'll see you then.
So besides Magic Origins, we've actually seen some other recent changes. And the one that I really want to talk about is that you're no longer allowed to play lands in front.
Yeah.
And not only are you no longer allowed to play lands in front, there's also rules about exactly how you have to orient your cards. Honestly, it just feels like someone watched Adrian Sullivan play a match and just decided you couldn't do any of those things. But the real problem for me is that I used to like playing lands in front when I was in feature matches. Only in feature matches, though, of course.
Oh, I'm perfectly aware. You would even change it. You would start out normal and then go to. I'm like, what is he doing? Because I'd always be in the booth, and you would even do it mid game. Like one time, you attacked with a creature and then brought it behind your lands and kept it back there. I'm like, really?
And you're telling me I can't do any of that anymore?
That's correct.
Well, I can live with that, even though I will miss it. I also wanted to mention the mulligan rule because I think that the new mulligan rule is awesome. I don't think it's quite got the meat for a full show, but I did really want to mention it because
go for it.
It's topical and we're booked the next couple weeks. I think that this is just a great step forward. What the new mulligan rule does, which is if you've mulliganed at all, you get to scry one after you keep your final hand. It makes it so there's less non-games. And that games involving mulligans give a bigger chance to the person who mulliganed. And I think that's just huge. I think that the discrepancy between someone keeping a 7 and the win percentage, when someone goes to 6 is just so big that I think trying to narrow that gap of win percentage is really, really good. I think this is just huge news for basically anyone who's a fan of playing games of Magic. And I'm really looking forward to it. I wanted to handle a couple common objections because, one, this is not too powerful. This does not make mulliganing too good. I really don't think it does. I think if you say that mulliganing to 6 or less, you have, something like a 38% chance to win. And if you're on the play, or if you keep 7, 62% chance to win. This is based on a bunch of standard games that got pulled, like 80,000 standard games that got pulled on MTG Goldfish from Magic Online. I think this isn't going to make it so now it's 50-50. It's just going to make it so now it's like 42% instead of 38%. I think that's good. I think it'll reduce. I do not think that it makes it so that combo decks are too consistent. I think that people are actually going to find out that it probably isn't even better for combo decks than non-combo decks because when a combo deck plays against a non-combo deck, the non-combo deck gets to now try to find cards like Stony Silence or Thoughtseize or Dispel at a higher rate too. So I don't think
interesting. Yeah,
I don't think it's just like. Yep, combo gets better. I do not believe that is accurate. Delver of Secrets is not now busted.
I did hear that one.
Yes, it's true. You'll get to scry one, then play a Delver and know it'll flip. But first, for that to happen, you can't have a fetch land. If you play a fetch land turn 1, your scries goes away if you're on the play. Second, your top card has to be a non-spell that you then put at the bottom. Because otherwise, if it was a spell, then you were probably going to play Delver turn 1 anyway. Every deck where you play Delver, you still just cast it turn 1.
That's right.
So the confluence of all these factors, and you had to mulligan, of course. All these factors combined do not make Delver very much better at all. The last interesting thing is that it makes being on the draw better than it was before. Because when you're on the draw, your turn 1 scry land and your turn 1 fetch land don't mess up your scry. Whereas if you're on the play and you get the mulligan scry, and then you keep it on top, and then you have a temple in your hand, you're not getting value out of the temple because you're just going to keep it on top. You already know what the top card is. Likewise, if you've scried and you kept it on top, then playing a fetch land is not good. You can no longer play a turn 1 fetch land and use it and still keep the card on top. Whereas if you're on the draw, both those things are no longer issues because you get to scry and then you get to draw it for your turn. And either way, your fetch land or your scry land still works. So I think being on the draw is another thing that you could use a little bit more power since, again, being on the play, you're just going to win more often. So I think this adds percentage to all the people who want it, and I think it just makes Magic a better game. So I really do like this, despite the fact that I can no longer play lands in front. Do you know what will happen if I do play lands in front during a feature match?
I don't know. I think somebody would call a judge.
There's only one way to find out, I guess.